March 14th, 2025, 11:42 a.m. Federal Courtroom 3, Eastern District. I stand in a pressed uniform with my hands folded at parade rest while my lawyer tells the judge I am prepared to plead guilty to criminal negligence causing catastrophic equipment failure and false record keeping. The prosecutor looks satisfied. My counsel looks resigned. The maintenance chief who caused the entire disaster sits 3 rows back with his arms crossed, watching me take the fall he engineered. What none of them realize yet is that my plea allows me one final statement before sentencing. And I have been preparing that statement for 6 weeks. This is not surrender. This is the only way to force the truth through a system built to protect the wrong side. They never saw it coming. The pressure against me is absolute. The maintenance chief has 22 years of service, an impeccable record on paper, and direct access to every investigation file. The prosecutor built her entire case on the assumption that I falsified logs to cover my own incompetence. My defense counsel advised me 3 separate times that fighting this would destroy not just my career, but the career of my crew chief, a 24-year-old airman who trusted me and followed every order I gave. The chief made that threat explicit in writing. Plead guilty and walk away with a dishonorable discharge, or fight and watch him bury my subordinate under administrative separation proceedings that would end her military future before it began. The system assumes guilt flows downhill. The chief knows how to use that assumption like a weapon. My own lawyer does not know what I am about to do. I kept him in the dark deliberately. If he knew I planned to plead guilty to a crime I did not commit, his ethical obligations would force him to stop me. If he knew I planned to use my allocution statement to introduce accusations and evidence against the chief, he would warn me that sentencing hearings are not trials, and judges can shut down testimony they consider irrelevant or improper. So I told him I accepted the plea, that I wanted this over, that I understood the consequences. He believed me because it made sense. Everyone believes the narrative that fits their expectations. How did I force the truth through a system that was built to protect the wrong side? That is the whole case. I came to this unit 16 months ago as a maintenance officer responsible for hydraulic systems on cargo transport aircraft. The maintenance chief, a master sergeant named Callahan, had been running the shop for 4 years. He was respected, connected, and untouchable. Within my first month, I noticed discrepancies in the logs. Torque inspections signed off at times when no personnel were on shift. Parts requisitions that did not match installation records. Small things, easy to dismiss as clerical errors. I flagged them in my weekly reports, and Callahan thanked me for my attention to detail, then explained that contractor teams sometimes worked odd hours and that supply chain software had known glitches. Reasonable explanations. I moved on. The equipment failure happened on January 9th, 2025, at 06:15 during a pre-flight inspection. A primary hydraulic actuator on a cargo ramp assembly catastrophically failed under normal pressure testing. The actuator housing sheared at the mounting bracket. Metal fragments punctured 2 adjacent hydraulic lines. The entire aft hydraulic system flooded with contaminated fluid in under 90 seconds. If the failure had occurred in flight, the aircraft would have been uncontrollable. 3 crew members were injured by pressurized spray. The aircraft was grounded. The investigation started within hours. I was the officer of record. My name was on every maintenance log for that aircraft. Callahan made sure of that. He had quietly routed all sign-off authority through me 6 weeks earlier under the guise of streamlining accountability. I did not question it because it matched standard protocol. What I did not realize was that he was setting up a paper trail that would make me liable for every falsified entry he had created over the previous 8 months. The investigator was a captain from the safety office. He pulled the logs and found my signature on a hydraulic system overhaul completed on December 3rd. The overhaul included replacement of the failed actuator. The part was listed as a certified original equipment component purchased from an approved contractor. The torque inspection was signed off. The pressure test was signed off. Every procedural step showed green, except the actuator that failed was not an original part. Forensic analysis showed it was a counterfeit component, made from substandard alloy with no certification markings. It was never going to survive operational stress. Someone installed a fake part and falsified every record to hide it. The captain asked me directly if I had personally witnessed the installation. I said no. I explained that I signed off based on crew chief reports and contractor documentation. He asked if I verified the part serial numbers. I said I relied on the supply officer and the contractor invoices. He asked if I understood that my signature made me legally responsible. I said yes. Then he asked if I had any reason to believe the records were false. I hesitated. That hesitation was enough. He wrote in his report that I demonstrated awareness of irregularities, but failed to take corrective action. The narrative was set. I was negligent at best, complicit at worst. Callahan visited me that evening in my office. He closed the door and sat down without asking. He said the investigation was going to look bad for both of us, but that he had a way to contain the damage. If I accepted responsibility and acknowledged that I had been overwhelmed and cut corners, the case would close quickly. No one else would be implicated. My crew chief, who had actually signed the installation checklist under my supervision, would be protected. If I fought the findings, he said, the investigation would expand. My crew chief would be questioned, her records would be examined. She had signed documents I had countersigned. She would be charged as an accessory. Her career would end before she turned 25. He said this calmly, like he was offering me a reasonable compromise. Then he stood up and left. I sat in that office for 2 hours. I pulled every maintenance file I had access to. I cross-referenced contractor invoices with supply records. I checked timestamps on digital logs against shift schedules. I found the pattern. Over 8 months, Callahan had systematically billed for premium certified parts and pocketed the difference by installing cheap counterfeit components. He used a shell contractor that existed only on paper. The invoices showed payments to a limited liability corporation with no physical address and no business history prior to 18 months ago. The name on the business registration was his brother-in-law. Every payment was approved through his own office. Every installation was logged during off shifts when no oversight was present. Every torque seal was faked using colored lacquer applied with a brush instead of a proper inspection. I copied everything I could access. I saved files to 3 separate encrypted drives. I documented metadata timestamps that proved logs had been backdated. I found a safety warning I had filed in October about irregular parts sourcing. Callahan had marked it resolved without ever performing the audit I requested. I found production schedules that showed the aircraft was operational during maintenance windows that Callahan claimed as downtime for overhauls. The equipment could not have been repaired while it was flying missions. The logs were fiction. But I had no authority to present this evidence. I was the target of the investigation, not the investigator. Anything I provided would be dismissed as self-serving fabrication. If I went to the Inspector General, Callahan would hear about it within hours and destroy whatever he could still access. If I went to my commanding officer, I would be told to let the investigation run its course. The system was not designed to let the accused build a case against their accuser. I was supposed to defend myself, not attack upward. Then the prosecutor filed charges: criminal negligence, false official statements, conduct unbecoming. She offered a plea deal: plead guilty to negligence and false record keeping, accept a dishonorable discharge, serve no jail time. If I went to trial, she would pursue the maximum sentence and add charges against my crew chief as a co-conspirator. The deal was designed to look merciful. It was extortion. My lawyer told me to take it. He said the evidence against me was overwhelming and that my best chance was to show remorse and move on. He said fighting would destroy me financially and emotionally, and that I would lose anyway. He did not say it, but I knew he was right about the trial. I could not win in a courtroom where Callahan controlled the evidence, and the prosecutor had already built her entire case around my guilt. So I agreed to plead guilty. I signed the paperwork. I told my lawyer I understood the consequences. The hearing was scheduled for March 14th. I had 6 weeks to prepare. The only move I had left? I researched allocution law. A defendant has the right to make a personal statement to the judge before sentencing. The statement is supposed to be an opportunity for remorse, explanation, or mitigation. Judges allow wide latitude because it is considered a fundamental right. The statement is not evidence. It is not subject to cross-examination. It is not bound by the same procedural rules as trial testimony. And everything said during allocution becomes part of the permanent public record. I wrote my statement over 4 weeks. I included specific dates, specific invoice numbers, specific metadata timestamps. I named Callahan 18 times. I described the shell corporation, the counterfeit parts, the falsified torque seals, the backdated logs. I referenced the safety warning he buried. I cited the production schedules that contradicted his maintenance claims. I listed every piece of evidence I had saved and explained exactly where it was stored and how it could be verified. I wrote it like a prosecutor's opening statement because that is exactly what it was. I was going to turn my own sentencing hearing into the trial Callahan thought he had avoided. The risk was absolute. A judge could cut me off after 30 seconds and refuse to hear anything not directly related to my own mitigation. The prosecutor could object and argue that I was introducing inadmissible accusations. My own guilty plea would make everything I said look like a desperate attempt to shift blame. And even if the judge listened, nothing I said would change my conviction. I would still have a criminal record. I would still lose my career. The plea was irrevocable. But Callahan would be exposed. Everything I said would be part of the official court transcript. The press could access it. The inspector general would be forced to investigate. Even if the judge dismissed my statement as irrelevant, the accusations would be public and documented. Callahan could not bury what was already in the record. I also set up a dead man's switch. I gave copies of all the evidence to a civilian attorney, with instructions to release everything to the press if my statement was suppressed or if anything happened to me or my crew chief. The attorney did not need to believe me. He just needed to follow instructions. If the courtroom failed, the evidence would still get out. Now I am standing in front of the judge. He asks if I understand the charges. I say yes. He asks if I am pleading guilty voluntarily. I say yes. He asks if anyone has threatened or coerced me. I pause. I say no. It is technically true. Callahan threatened my crew chief, not me. The judge accepts the plea. He asks the prosecutor if she has any sentencing recommendations. She asks for a dishonorable discharge and 2 years probation. She says I have shown no remorse. The judge nods. Then he turns to me and asks if I have anything to say before sentencing. I say yes, Your Honor. I have a statement. I pull 4 printed pages from my jacket pocket. My lawyer tenses. He did not know I prepared anything. The prosecutor looks bored. Callahan leans forward slightly in his seat. I begin to read. I describe the counterfeit actuator. I name the shell contractor. I cite the invoice number and the payment date. I explain that the part was never certified and that the failure was inevitable. I say that the installation logs were falsified and that I can prove it using metadata timestamps. The judge's expression shifts. The prosecutor sits up straighter. My lawyer tries to interrupt, but the judge raises his hand and tells me to continue. I describe the pattern: 8 months of fraud, dozens of counterfeit parts, hundreds of thousands of dollars in embezzled funds. I name Callahan. I say he used his position to route approval authority through me to create a false paper trail. I say he threatened my crew chief to force my guilty plea. I say I have copies of every invoice, every log, every safety report, and every piece of evidence stored in 3 separate secure locations. I say I am willing to provide access to all of it immediately. The courtroom is silent. The prosecutor is on her feet objecting. My lawyer is trying to get my attention. Callahan is staring at me with his jaw tight and his hands flat on the bench in front of him. The judge tells the prosecutor to sit down. He asks me if I am accusing Master Sergeant Callahan of criminal conduct. I say yes, Your Honor. He asks if I have evidence to support these accusations. I say yes, Your Honor. I can provide it today. The judge calls a recess. He orders the prosecutor and my lawyer into chambers. I am told to wait. Callahan does not move. He sits in his seat staring straight ahead. His face is pale. He knows exactly what just happened. I turned his own trap into a public accusation he cannot bury. 2 hours later, the judge returns. He postpones sentencing indefinitely. He orders an independent investigation into my allegations. He directs the prosecutor to provide me with immunity for any testimony related to the corruption claims. He says that if my evidence supports what I have stated, the court will reconsider my plea in light of coercion and fraud upon the court. He says that if I am lying, I will face additional perjury charges. Then he looks directly at Callahan and says that Master Sergeant Callahan is to have no contact with any witnesses or evidence related to this matter pending investigation. Callahan stands and leaves, without looking at me. His lawyer follows him. The prosecutor avoids eye contact. My own lawyer asks me what the hell I just did. I tell him I forced the truth into the record. He says I just confessed to perjury by pleading guilty to a crime I claim I did not commit. I say I know. He asks if I understand that I might still be convicted. I say yes, but Callahan will not walk away clean. The investigation takes 4 months. The Inspector General interviews 23 witnesses. They audit 2 years of maintenance records. They subpoena Callahan's financial records and his brother-in-law's shell corporation. They find exactly what I said they would find: counterfeit parts, falsified logs, embezzled funds, evidence tampering, obstruction. The final report recommends criminal charges against Callahan and administrative action against 3 supply officers who failed to catch the fraud. My case is reopened. The prosecutor moves to vacate my guilty plea on grounds of coercion and newly discovered evidence. The judge grants the motion. All charges against me are dismissed. My crew chief is cleared. I am reinstated with back pay and a formal apology from the command. Callahan is court-martialed. He is convicted on 14 counts of fraud, falsification, and obstruction. He's sentenced to 6 years in military prison and a dishonorable discharge. His brother-in-law is charged in federal court. 3 supply officers are demoted and reassigned. I am transferred to a new unit. My record is clean. My career survives. But the cost is visible. I spent 4 months under investigation while everyone assumed I was guilty. I destroyed my relationship with my own lawyer. I admitted in open court that I lied under oath. That confession is still part of the permanent record, even though the plea was vacated. Some people still believe I was involved and only escaped because I turned on Callahan first. But my crew chief kept her career. The corruption was exposed, and Callahan lost everything he tried to protect by sacrificing me. Sometimes, the only way to win is to let them think you have already lost. Sometimes the plea is not the end. It is the door.